we do have an awful lot of people here, so I was going to not do introductions, but if you could write in the chat at some point your name, who you are and where you're from, like what your interest in this subject is, it would be really helpful. But I think we've only got an hour and quite a lot to get through, so I didn't want to waste lots of time doing introductions with loads and loads of people. But I think it would be great to capture who's here, and then other people can look in the chat if they're interested in who you are and connecting with you as well. So if you could do that, that would be great. So the first thing I just want to do is to welcome everybody. Just make sure you know we're recording the meeting. Thank you so much for coming. As I said, this has proven a whole lot more interested, but loads more people interested than I thought would be for an inaugural meeting, but that's like really just fantastic news. At CPRE London, we've been working on front gardens for quite a while now, and our interest relates back to a lot of work I did a year or two ago, dating back even 3 years now, on parking actually. So it started with our interest in parking, which in turn relates to the use of space in London, but also to our work on climate, because we see a big, strong connection between parking and climate action, but also on delivery of the Mayor's transport strategy targets, which from our point of view, parking is a really centrally important part of that. But more recently, we've been working on front gardens in relation to what we call our sponge city work, which is about the link between permeability in London and front gardens being paved over, and the link between that and flooding, surface water flooding, but also river pollution. So we held a webinar, which many of you may have attended, and we found it was so popular, we actually thought, well, perhaps we should consider creating a network of people with an interest in front garden and see what we might achieve with that. So that's why we're here today. This is hopefully the inaugural meeting, and if everybody feels that it's a good idea, then we can carry it on. So there are broadly 4 areas of work within the work that we've been doing on front gardens. One is that we've been working with various other organisations, some of them in this room, to put in a bid to Ofwat's Innovation Fund to try to get some action going on front gardens in London. Another one is to just try to promote action on front gardens and to explain to the general public why it's so important. And a third is to try to think about the types of policies that local authorities can usefully implement, so best practice policies and what we can promote to local authorities. And finally, thinking about what are the national policies that might, or what can national government do, or what national policies might be needed to promote reinstatement of front gardens. So we've got a few people to talk about front gardens and what they're doing and the work they're doing. First of all, we're going to have somebody, Annabelle, who's helped me with this project as a volunteer for the last year or two, to give some facts and figures quickly. Then we've got Christine Aberrell to go over from the Front Gardens project in Ealing to go through the history of front garden action or policy. And then we've got presentations from a couple of people who've been taking action out there on the ground to talk to us about what they're doing. So I then want to come back to what we can do with the network. So I do want to leave time for that. So for the presenters, I need you to keep it as short as possible. Otherwise, we won't have time at the end. So in the meantime, please can you all write in the chat, not just your name and your where you're from, but also if you have ideas and thoughts on what a network, a front garden network can achieve or what it should do, then please do write it down, and then we'll come back to this at the end. So if you can think about it while we're meeting. Could we have microphones off, please? I've got a Doncha's iPhone was yeah. If you could just mute everybody, that would be great. So we're going to go directly now to Annabelle, who's going to talk about some facts and figures. I've got to share the screen quickly, so if you just bear with me. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So if Annabelle, you'd like to talk through that, that would be great. You're on mute, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, everybody. We've done a few facts and stats for you, so you can just get a kind of idea of what's going on with front gardens. The first of which is that we think probably that 80% of front gardens may well be paved over. This is based on a survey that was carried out in 2011, which is flagged up there on this slide. And back in 2011, it was estimated that there was 63% of total front garden areas had been hard surfaced. And we believe that that figure will have increased since then, and that the Ealing Front Gardens project estimate that the figure could be as much as 80% or more. We don't know the figure because the study hasn't been repeated, but we're hoping that there may be some future work on this. Another issue, of course, is flooding and stormwater. And the issue of front gardens being paved over has come to the attention of the London Climate Resilience Review, which published a report last year, which recommended that the UK government's review into managing the surface water impacts of increases in impermeable surfaces in public and private spaces, that the government should in fact consider introducing stormwater charges for people who pave over their gardens and incentives to remove paving. Another concern around flooding is that the fact fresh modelling published by the Environment Agency last December, which factored in something new, namely the effects of climate change, shows that 1 in 4 homes in England are at risk of flash flooding. So that's obviously a major concern and obviously relevant to the issue of paved over front gardens. There is an issue of, what difference would it make if the paving was removed? And we've been supplied with some figures by an academic in Belgium in saying that if for every square meter depaved, an additional 250 litres per year would infiltrate into the ground. So that's obviously a significant figure when you're thinking about sponge city and how we could make London more spongy, essentially. Ironically, electric vehicle charging, we believe, has probably aggravated the issue of paved over front gardens because people want to park their cars in their front gardens and then have the car near their charger. And one thing that we've discovered with figures from the RAC is that homeowners are incentivized to effectively pave over their front gardens because it's cheaper to charge at home. So if you see, looking at this document, home charging off-peak costs 7 pence per kilowatt compared to 49 pence off-peak when using an on-street charging charger. So it's basically 7 times cheaper, looking at just those statistics, to charge from home. So what can be done about all of these sorts of problems? Well, a rain garden, 20% of the size of the roof, will intercept most rainfall. And so you'll see here that Thames Water's rain garden guide states that a rain garden 150 millimeters deep and 20% of the area of the roof that it serves will be able to intercept all of the runoff from a typical summer storm where 10 to 15 millimeters of rainfall might fall. So that just gives you an overview of some key facts and stats, and we might come back to those later. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And now we're going to move to Christine Eberl, who has managed and run the Front Gardens project for some time. And she's going to talk through the history of the Front Garden. Christine, are you?
Yeah, hello.
Are you there? I'm just going to, there we go. So everyone see that okay?
Right, okay. Thank you very much, Alice. And I'm delighted that you've taken the initiative on this, because it feels as though we've been banging the drum on front gardens for an awful long time, as you'll see from my slides. Ealing Front Gardens project is a community-led project, and it all started back in 1995, as I'm sure most of you know, with pavement crossovers becoming permitted development under a big a permitted development a bill introduced by John Major's government in 1995. It wasn't very long after that Ealing's Local Agenda 21, which is where the Ealing Front Gardens project grew from, was alerted to runoff problems on the River Brent. So what the countryside rangers were finding in that relatively short space of time was considerable variations in fluctuation of the river and scouring of the banks, and they could see quite clearly that it was being caused by runoff from paved front gardens, particularly in the west of the borough. In 2005, we did a big survey. I'm a market researcher by profession, so I knew how to do this. And it did show that similar figures to what we'll see later, that a total of 64% of the borough's front garden area had already been hard surfaced by then. You wouldn't expect it to have been that high without the legislation. And quite a lot, a significant proportion of front gardens were actually totally hard surfaced then already, 100%. In 2007, there was some big flooding of English cities, and that made the government sit up a bit. And in 2008, they introduced a modification to the permitted development, which says that it's a cop-out, really. If you have more than 5 square meters of impermeable surfacing, you have to apply for planning permission. But the big cop-out is that if the surface is porous or has provision for runoff, then you're not restricted by that. And so there's nothing to stop under that legislation the entire front garden being surfaced if it's covered with porous or provision for runoff. And that's what, of course, all the contractors and the providers of hard surfacing now promote. In 2011, Annabelle's already mentioned this, the survey by Green Space Information for Greater London showed similar figure to ours, 63% of the total front garden area now hard surfaced. And then the government's continuing support for front gardens being paved over and incentivizing it. The electric vehicle home charge scheme was introduced in 2014, and that gave grants for off-road charging points, but they had to be off-road. And so in many cases, of course, that's the front garden, particularly in suburban areas. In 2017, we did another survey of front gardens that had, or properties that had recently approved crossovers, and 80% of those we could see had been virtually totally hard surfaced. In 2020, we became part of London National Park City. And by this time, 2 things. First of all, paved front gardens totally normalized. Most people expect nowadays that the front garden is going to be paved over, and it's widespread throughout the country. But influential voices were beginning to speak up about this concerns, including the Climate Change Committee, Ofwat, the Royal Academy for Engineering, which was particularly concerned about runoff and pollution in rivers. The London Fire Brigade, of course, concerned about flooding of basements, and others too, all beginning to make a noise about this. So the next one, please, Alice. Yeah. The significant one was the National Infrastructure Commission. In 2022, they produced a report on surface water flooding, and they recommended that the government review the role of front garden hard surfacing. That's the first time that it was really taken seriously, or seems to have been really taken seriously. And the government should have responded within 12 months. In fact, it took a bit longer, but it did accept the recommendation in March. And the review is supposedly in progress. Could you just go back to the last one? That's it. Thanks ever so much. And in 2023, there were various storms in this part of London, and I was able to capture quite a lot of photographic evidence of runoff on so-called permeable paving and also on provision for runoff paving. So those are both blogs on the website, which you can see above. As Annabelle's already mentioned, in 2024, the London Climate Resilience Review suggested actual action on this as well, although they don't have any powers, it's recommendations. And then here we come up to today, launching what I hope will be a powerful force to get this issue really high up the agenda, because it's just been going on for such a ridiculous amount of time. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Christine. And just so everyone knows, I will of course make that available to everybody. We'll try to find a page. We'll probably try to make a page where we can put all the things, the resources that we've had. So Amanda Gibbons is now going to present on the Blue campaign. Amanda, is that okay? Are you good to share your slides, or do you need me?
No, I've got them.
Great,
so I
great,
just need to be able to share my screen.
So you should be able to share, I hope.
Hang on.
If not, John, can you enable sharing? Or is it
Yeah,
sharing now?
It's okay. I'm going in. I'm going in.
Great.
Can you see?
Yes, that's great.
Perfect. Okay. So, I mean, thank you again for inviting me along. I'm glad to be able to talk to people. I run the Blue campaign. We're about showing people how they can create a home for nature in their personal and community outdoor spaces, and how to do it for free with very little effort or time. And of course, the more people who do this, we don't just create spaces for wildlife in our own places, but we're creating wildlife corridors as well. Now, we're all really busy, and the good thing about nature is that if you leave it alone for a while, it will grow and flourish. If you've ever seen a dandelion pop up, you'll know how persistent nature can be. Now, if you leave some permanent space for nature, it comes roaring back. The weeds which generally pop up are native plants, and they're the perfect food and home for a range of living creatures. So, for example, dandelions support more than 50 different species of insects, including moths, bees, and other pollinators. And some of those in turn are then eaten by garden birds, which helps them to flourish as well. If you think about stinging nettles, they feed the caterpillars of peacock and small tortoiseshell butterflies. They provide shelter for aphids, which ladybirds eat. And the seeds that the stinging nettles produce are eaten by garden birds in the autumn. So at the Blue campaign, what we do is we support individuals and councils. So unlike charities, we exist solely to help normal people create change for themselves in their community. If you want advice on how to bring more wildlife into your garden, we'll help you. If you want your council to mow less and leave public spaces for nature, we'll give you guidance and support. We're not at all possessive of the Blue Hearts. We don't sell them. We encourage people to make them from recycled materials if they want to. We very much encourage people to take what we do and go out and do it themselves. We have Blue Hearts because they're a beautiful standout way to show that your rewilding efforts are deliberate. I think all of us have had neighbours who say, oh, well, why isn't that garden tidy? And this is a very beautiful, recognisable way of showing that you're doing it on purpose. And as you can see from some of the photos on this slide, you can decorate the Blue Hearts and add words to get the message across even further. And we found that blue hearts have a tendency to spread once one person puts them up, especially in a front garden where they can be seen. Other people will ask about them, they'll love the idea, and then they'll put up their own one. In turn, that's also quite a nice way of starting to grow new friendships in your community, because it's an easy way to find neighbours who are interested in that kind of thing as well. So, as well as being low effort, time saving, and free, letting nature have a home in your outdoor space has human-centered benefits too. It's been proven that spending time in nature is good for our mental health. And if you give yourself a rewilded space, it gives you somewhere to regularly take your morning cup of tea or coffee and just spend 5 minutes watching life move around you. I realise that it's been appalling weather lately, but when you can, that lifts your spirits and helps reduce any anxiety or other hard feelings that you're struggling with. And as I mentioned, it can also really help to develop community where you live. We've got several local groups around the country who've taken the idea of the Blue Heart campaign, and they do things like set up children's Blue Heart painting activities in the community, or they've worked with local councils to take over local verges, or to get the local council to stop mowing as much, and have resulted in some really beautiful wildlife verges in their areas. We're very keen to help people feel powerful and able to create change for themselves and their community, rather than relying on giving a charity money or getting us to do it for them. So it's very easy to get started with the Blue campaign. You can just set aside a patch in a garden, or if you've got a paved garden or a balcony, you can put aside some pots and look around for a local seed swap program, as they often have wildflower seeds free to give away. If you've got space, you can talk about native hedging, or a pot pond, or a small pile of wood. All of those things provide different types of home and food for nature. And of course, then if you would like to, you can put up a blue heart to show what you're doing. And if you want to share a photo with us, we'd obviously love to see it. I hope that's inspiring, and you feel it's relevant for you. You're welcome to send me any questions in the chat, or to get in touch via our website, our Facebook page, or here we go. My email address is there, and you can see a range of the blue hearts people have created as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. And before we move swiftly on to Eleanor Broad, Eleanor, if you get your, if you can, Amanda, if you can stop share, and Eleanor
I'm trying to find out how.
That's okay. And then I just want to remind everybody to put into the chat your people who weren't here before, put into chat your name and your interest, or your organisation in this subject, so that we've got a record, and so that, you know, fundamentally what a network is about is enabling people to connect with other people. And so we will try to make sure that everybody is aware of who else is in the room, because there's a lot of people here, so that they can contact or connect after the meeting if they would like to. So moving swiftly on, we're Eleanor, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, I'm Eleanor Broad, and there are 3 of us here from our street, which is Parkhouse Gardens. So Colin and Anne Hines should be on there. I'm not sure how we can get them to the top, but they're going to jump in, so we're going to talk about this together. So thanks for having us, Alice. So Colin, Anne and I all live on a street called Parkhouse Gardens, aptly named, which is in East Twickenham, just up from the River Thames between Twickenham and Richmond Bridge. I should say we're here very much as residents, not as a sort of formal group. But we live on a street which, as you can see, in fact, I think that is Colin and Anne's house, the pink one there, of Art Deco semi-detached houses, all of which have front gardens exactly like the one you see on the left. As you can see, I think in this photo and maybe this photo here, they have narrow driveways that led to garages. So sort of to rewind a little bit, what kind of prompted us to start to take action. I should also say that, and that is a picture there of Colin. I should mention that this is quite a special street. So as I said, it's a cul-de-sac. We benefit from a lot of greenery, which, as I think it was Amanda was saying, really helps with that sort of community. We are a very strong community. We have a WhatsApp group, which is there on the right. Colin has led quite a few initiatives in the past. And I should say he and Anne are kind of the unofficial mayors of the street. And so we are quite a strong sort of tight community. We know all of our neighbours. We have street parties. We meet Saturday evenings. Most Saturday evenings since lockdown, people will gather on the street for drinks. All that to say that it is a very friendly place where we know our neighbours, so we're keen to sort of anything we do that we're doing it in concert and we're not alienating anybody. That said, I think it's fair to say that over a period of time, and I should say I've lived on the street for 10 years, and Colin and Anne, how long have you been on the street? 30, am I right? Maybe you might need to unmute yourselves. I think they've been on the street about 30 years. And so there's sort of 3 or 4 years. 30 years, yeah. So the photos actually that I showed just now were photos that I think Colin took when they first moved in, which is why you might have thought they're quite odd looking because they're not from today. But Colin's done an amazing job of sort of archiving what the street has looked like over the years. And I think sort of a number of things started happening over the last year and a half. So in a way, there has been this kind of gradual, almost imperceptible paving over of front gardens along our street. So this is just one example that is right down my end of the street. And no judgment, of course, but you know, normally the house on the right has 2 very large cars parked on it. So on the left, that was a garden that I knew well. And during lockdown, I used to talk to the man who lived in that house, who was very, very elderly and who used to look after his garden. So even during lockdown, we were able to talk as he was tending to his garden. He then died during COVID and the house was sold. And that is sort of the result that you can see there, which is just going back to what Amanda's saying, just felt so sad. But at the time, I suppose there's a sense of what can we actually do? And then there's a sort of also understanding that people need more space for their cars because they don't fit down those driveways to the garage anymore. They need to charge them because they're getting electric cars, which on the one hand is obviously a great thing. So that was sort of the sort of imperceptible kind of move. Then I think 2 other things maybe happened, certainly in my case. Well, one, there was a huge amount of news, as there has been, but particularly about sewage going into the Thames. And as I said, we live just up from the Thames. So there's, you know, we're very aware of the sewage going in, even if we don't necessarily smell it or see it, but it's something that started to become more and more in conversation. Richmond declares a climate emergency. What does that actually mean in practice? And then I should say, personally, I worked on a report called Greening Up, where we were pulling together all of the research around the benefits, as all of you were talking about before, the benefits of living in green places, green cities. And we did spend a bit of time looking at front gardens. So all of these things sort of were kind of gathering pace, I suppose. And then I think about that time also, Richmond changed its policy on front gardens, which led to a bit of uproar. And I know Alice and I think both Christine wrote extensively about that. And then I should say the sort of tipping point really in a way, well, for me and for another neighbour who's not on the call, was this example of a front garden conversion. So as you can see on the left, it was in fact already, it already did have space for 2 cars, but it has permeable gravel. It had something of a structure to it still. It had greenery, and that house was sold. And I happened to be walking past when I took the photo on the top right there. And there's just something so sort of brutal about that destruction that it really sort of felt to me at that time as if it was being ransacked. And especially somehow the plants being in bloom, it just felt really unnecessary. And then we all sort of waited a bit to see what would happen, and the result is what you can see on the bottom right. And I should also say that another friend and neighbour lives directly opposite that house. And, you know, she herself just expressed the dismay at having enjoyed looking at the house before in the front garden. I mean, it's not as if it's a particularly special front garden, but you suddenly realise how it's a lot more special than what it is now. I often think of some people's front gardens as being a gift to the street. So Colin and Anne have a wonderful front garden, and everything you were talking about, Amanda, about sort of wildlife is something that Anne sort of advocates and has an extremely wild front garden. And that really is a gift to the street as you walk down. So I think this sort of example really kind of got to people. And the neighbour I talked about, she was brave enough to go onto our WhatsApp group and bring the subject up without really wanting to alienate the person who just bought the house, but sort of bring it up as something, is this something that other people feel as strongly as I do? And as she did, and so on. And that sort of led to a bit of an outpouring of people feeling the same way. And so it led to, in the first instance, and I'm going to let Colin and talk actually, but I'll just sort of say what we've sort of done is, subject came up on WhatsApp group, we convened a meeting of interested neighbours, at which I sort of shared a lot of the facts and figures that Annabelle talked about. And we just really started to have a conversation about it, asking, do we really need to? Is there really such a stress on parking that people need to park off the road? And then I sort of shared some design ideas for around, if you really do have to do it, what are those sorts of, how can you do it in the best possible way? And then I think, can I hand over to you, Colin, for sort of, Colin and Anne, your kind of idea about how, I think our idea was, how can we share some of the information and give people sort of evidence and ideas for how to do it differently, but without being too prescriptive, because again, one of the key issues with front gardens is it is private land. So I think, and Colin and Anne's idea was very much to make this sort of toolkit for people moving into the street, and we have a website, which I can share. They are there, Colin and Anne.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know how to get my picture up, sorry.
Oh,
Everyone can hear Colin. That's the most important thing.
yeah, and I put up some of the images from the website, Colin. So
Okay, that's great.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks, Eleanor.
Yeah, we'll just be very brief. Thanks, and Eleanor really summed up everything very well. But what's emerged is people have a desire to try and those who already had used their front gardens as carports to make it much greener. And so the kind of blue campaign, I think, is very interesting. Also incredibly impressive, Christine, how long you've been working on this in Ealing. We're very much Johnny come late this, but we are keen, and we've put it up on the website, and people are going to start to think about what they can do. We also have a lot of residents who have children in a local school, which is why I thought the Blue Heart thing was a very nice idea, that we can involve children in trying to make the front gardens less, to meet people's needs for having to park in the front garden, but also turn those gardens into something much greener and more wildlife friendly. Anne, why don't you say something about the Gardens World?
Okay, so I've subscribed to Gardens World magazine, and which supports the Chelsea Flower Show and the Hampton Court Flower Show. And every month they come up, in the magazine, there's lots of different types of gardens, shady gardens, sunny gardens, blah, 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 but never once front gardens. And I just thought, this is such a need for so many people over the country, increasingly. And I've written to Gardeners World editor. They won't respond. They haven't so far. They say they can't respond individually. We've tried again to write. We've tried again to phone. If anybody on this Zoom has contacts with the BBC, with Gardeners World, it would be great. I mean, it would be marvellous if the Hampton Court Flower Show did a front garden, including a car, and showed the different ways that you could maximise biodiversity and low-level planting. You don't need to have grass. You just need hard standing for the tyres of the car. Eleanor,
there was actually a front garden at a show. I'll include it in the notes. It was Wendy who spoke at our Front Gardens Network did it, but I will include that in the notes. If we could finish up in the next minute or two, that would be great, because I've still got to fit Jeff in, and we've still got to have time for our quick chat about
that's it.
Yeah,
thank you.
final sentence, the Chelsea Flower Show would be the thing to have it, and that would bunt it up the agenda a lot.
I think that's it from us. It's just to kind of give you a sense, but I will stop sharing now.
That's amazing, and those pictures are amazing and also devastating, and I just, you know, just my heart breaks really, and I'm sure everybody else's does too. We're going to move to Jeff, who's going to talk. Jeff, if you could get your slides and introduce yourself briefly, that would be great. And then I'm hoping we have a good bit of time to have a chat about the network and what we do next.
Great.
Yeah, go on, go, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alice. Can you hear me okay? And you can see my slide. Great. All right. Yes, I'll go through quickly. I am just here today representing a group, many of whom are on the call today. We call ourselves Connecting the Commons, and we are envisioning, as you can see here, really connecting up with, I guess, a network of eco corridors between the wonderful commons that we're very lucky to live between, of Wandsworth, Clapham, and Tooting. We are members of these various organizations. In fact, we have the co-chairs of the Friends of Wandsworth Common here today. Gareth James not able to attend, but a huge driver on the Clapham Common side of biodiversity. Justine from Beautify Balham is here today, who've already been doing a lot of wonderful work greening streets in our area, along with myself and Maddie Riddell, also members of some of these organizations. We have a lot of stuff going on, as I know other parts of London do, a lot of really a growing trend to increase biodiversity. As you can see here, these are signs from Wandsworth Common, Clapham Common, and Beautify Balham. Lots of great projects going on, very active. So within that context, though, we find ourselves with a challenge that's being articulated by others here, which is the streets can be fairly bare, and there does seem to be a bit of a worrying trend in the wrong direction. Maddie and I did a survey of one of the prime connecting streets between two of the commons, and we found a lot of front gardens fully paved, very few being actively cultivated in any way that might be considered even a little bit wildlife friendly. So that kind of gave us a sense of our baseline, as others are articulating. Beautify Balham have, as I said, been doing a lot, and they've run a festival. They run a festival each year, and they're very active. And I can see the difference when I walk through Balham, which is wonderful. We also have a railway line, which acts as a green corridor. It's not managed that way, and that helps between a couple of the commons. So we do have this vision, and we feel like we have a real opportunity here, which I think fits right into this network. And we're very grateful that this is starting, because it's coming right at the right time for us. We do have this vision that through these front gardens, window boxes, etc., we really could foster pollinator pathways. We really could do flood mitigation. I attended the big Sponge City event. That was wonderful, Alice. So that's what we're considering to be our scope. I do want to note that, although not between the commons I'm talking about, just a bit beyond between Wimbledon Park and King George's Park in Wandsworth, is this wonderful group called Green the Grid. You may have seen their website. Maybe some members are in attendance today, but Front Garden Friendly says it all. And these are photos of the awards that they issued just this summer for front gardens and also tree bases. Finally, these are questions that we would love to discuss, or to outside of this group to discuss, but we're wondering kind of the scale we should go at, focus on just a couple of priority streets to start with, or make a bigger, wider, case or plea or engagement. How best to engage? Is it a leaflet through the letterbox, newsletters, social media, events? If we're going to publish such communications, could we do it in common as a network rather than each of us reinventing the wheel? And likewise, having a source of tips, like Ealing Front Garden Project does on the National Park City website. The basics, very easy to follow. And we also have a question about rain gardens. We definitely see runoff in valleys that could be avoided or mitigated more. So that's basically it. And if you've got feedback directly for us, please pop it in the chat, and I'm sure a lot of this will be discussed in following discussion. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And thanks to all our speakers today. I just felt that, as a network, fundamentally, what you do is try to help people share information and see what other people are doing, partly to inspire, partly so that you don't repeat. And that's definitely one of the things I feel we can do. Of course, the Front Garden Project in Ealing has already made a very good start at providing a space for all of this information. But certainly that can be part of what we do. I certainly felt that regular meetings like this, maybe once a quarter, would be a good idea with speakers, and perhaps a newsletter, maybe once a month or once every 2 months, so that we could just get everybody to, we write to everybody, say, what have you got to contribute? And then we can create a newsletter that goes out to everybody once a month. So those are two things that I think are relatively simple that we can do. But what I really wanted to do was to hear from you guys about what you feel that as a network we could most usefully do. So hands up, and if you don't know how to do hands up, then just let me know somehow. So I've got Wandsworth Common, friends of Wandsworth Common. So hi, it's Richard and
Julia.
Julie. Yeah, hi, good to see you again.
Hi, Alice, and thanks very much. And a really big thank you to all the speakers. They were inspiring, and well done for all the work you've all done. A question that we would like to put to everybody is, obviously all the drivers are coming from communities. So we all need to put pressure on our councils, because they're the people allowing the dropped curbs and the paving over of front gardens and the what we call shit lawns on the back gardens. and really, I think this group now is big enough that we should start putting on pressure on the councils, because it's got to be political that we can move this forward more effectively.
Okay, thank you. Have I got any other hands up? Hopefully some other people will have some thoughts, or if you put them in the chat and would like to say it now, that would be really good too. This is your chance. Amanda.
I'm just trying to find a link on our website, because we've got something about talking to the council about getting them involved. I think we've found that councils tend to reciprocate more when you come to them with a solution, because they don't have time, and they want the solution that they can go, what a good idea, you've solved it, we'll just support that. But I just thought I'd say I agree, but I think the fact that there's lots of community involvement on board is a very good thing, because I mean, I certainly know I've been involved in environmental campaigning since the 90s, and the amount that the governments have done and councils has clearly been minimal enough to lead to where we are now. And I think community pressure and community involvement may get us in some ways further than trying to get the council and the government to do anything, because they don't seem inclined to do that.
Thank you. I mean, I wonder if we need to do all of it actually, but yeah, but let's move on. Libby and then Suzanne. Libby?
I'm in Ealing, and I'm very grateful for all Christine has done. I live the absolutely opposite end of the borough to Christine, and we have a problem with the council and the officers. There's not enough of them, and they don't have the money, even building control, to come and inspect what is happening. So I live in a road with large houses. A lot of them have been converted into 5 or 7 flats, and they're concreted or whatever over. But you can't get building control or anybody to come and actually take notice or stop them doing it. And we really need to somehow between us work out how we can get that to happen. It makes me weep every time I walk up the road and see yet another one. I just don't know how we do it. I mean, I have tried reporting them. They take no notice. They haven't got the time. They haven't got the people to do it. And I just don't know. Even when the planning permission tells them that they have to have permeables, etc. So if anybody's got any really good ways of sorting that out, I'd be very grateful.
Well, thanks, Libby. And I think, you know, I think the fact of the matter is that we've kind of collectively concluded over the last year or two that it's actually really hard for councils to do anything. And yes, many of them do try to kind of restrict, and we may have some councillors on the call here today who can say a few words, try to restrict new conversions or try to enforce against illegal crossovers, or indeed try to make sure that surfaces are permeable, but it's extremely hard for councils to do that. And so, you know, the question is, do we actually, you know, need to go further and, you know, try to campaign to retract permitted development rights, that kind of thing. Anyway, we'll move to Suzanne, and then Philip, you have your hand up. So Suzanne first.
Hi, I was just going to say something similar, because here there's a lot of rented accommodation, and the landlords dig up what are actually fairly small, front gardens, because they can then charge more because it's got a parking space, it's more rentable. And so I think we do need to engage with council somehow. And here they the workmen have to take a photo of what they've done after they've finished, when they do the dropped curb bit. Surely that's a way of sort of councils being able to see what's been done and enforcing ones that don't have at least some sort of drainage. It seems to me that there could be some, I mean, I agree, I appreciate that there's, you know, problems with staffing and enforcement, but I think we do need to engage councils, because just so many houses, particularly in London, are rented, and the landlords don't live locally, and, you know, community engagement doesn't get that far when there are only people here short term, maybe quite a lot of people here only for work for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Not really engaged in the local community.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it's absolutely, definitely, engagement with councils is definitely on our list of things. It's like, I guess, you know, how do we do that and how much can we achieve? But I think that's really, really important. And I definitely think there are councils out there who are really desperate for things to change as well. Philip.
Yes, thank you. I welcome this initiative, absolutely, Alice, and thank you for putting it together. I'd also like to re-emphasize the importance of working with National Park City, of which I was present at the inauguration meeting, and one of our members is the chair of National Park City, Nav Dial. I think that I want to emphasize the point about working cooperatively both with National Park City and also with local councils. Whilst there are difficulties with the local councils, if you come up with good ideas and take initiatives yourselves, which is clearly what is happening in this Zoom meeting today, I find that councils are responsive. They find it difficult if you just complain. Of course, they have to respond to complaints. They are democratic organisations, but what they welcome most is suggestions, cooperation, working together, and trying to sort out the things cooperatively, if you like. And that really is the point I want to make, that this is a joint effort. I resonate with all the things that have been said. For example, the last speaker spoke about the number of rented properties. It's not only rented properties, which are very important, it's also multi-let properties, which we have in this area. Enabling and encouraging people to participate is quite a challenge. And some of the initiatives that I think Twickenham spoke about just now in terms of street parties and meetings of that sort are crucial. And we've had those as well. You can't have them every month, of course. They tend to be once a year or so. And particularly around major events like the coronation, which was a major pulling together opportunity which we experienced. So I welcome this, and we will do our bit in Heston Action Group to make a positive contribution.
Amazing. Well, please do carry on doing that. It's really unbelievably important. It feels like, you know, we're kind of swimming against the tide, but there's an awful lot of people who are swimming. So, you know, we should eventually
not too many flood type swimmings, though, I hope.
Not swimming in the rivers either at the moment with all that rainfall. So I can't see any more hands up, but surely I'm sure that there must be some people who would like to just say something about why, you know, what would you like to get out of a network? What do you think is the most important for you? So it'd be great to hear from a few more people. Anyone? Alma? You can unmute if. There we go.
Hello. First of all,
Hi.
thank you for all the speakers. It's very interesting. I live in Southeast London, and I'm part of the St. John's Society. We have a greening group as well, and we managed recently, in fact, last year, to create a rain garden, which won an award. I can't remember, something sustainability thing. However, I personally started up to green, putting plants between bins. We have the situation where our bins are on the pavement. There's no other space. But there's always space between. So I'm collecting empty containers and put plants in there. Interestingly, what I found is that some people a bit, how can I say, not everybody wants it. Even they all enjoy it. Suddenly the street, or the bit I managed so far, looks really a lot nicer and more pleasant and everything, and the children love it. But some people, they kind of worried about the wall, or it's this ownership property. So what I'm saying is, there's a little, I encountered a little bit of not people very opening, although at the same time they enjoy it. So yeah, that's all. And all my endeavor, I'm an artist, and what I'm trying to do is nowadays combine art and horticulture. Although I'm not a gardener, and I just do what I feel
Sounds
I
great.
can do. Yeah.
That
Thank
sounds
you.
great. Thanks for that contribution, Alma. And Anita, you had your hand up there.
Yes, I did put something in the chat. My colleague Dorothy Boswell is also in this chat. We have been working with Islington Council on a borough-wide campaign, which we have every year, Islington in Bloom. But we've emphasised planting tree pits as a way of getting wildlife corridors and a necklace of wildlife gardens, is how we expressed it. And we managed to get, they've always encouraged it, and there's always been guidance, but it was impossible to find on the website. So we've rewritten it. It's now easy to find on the website. And we are promoting it, and we've been planting gardens, wildlife gardens, with various different community groups. And we want to encourage the front gardens in the same way this year through the campaign.
Great stuff.
And we use the Instagram page, for instance, to just, hammer the messages home. We're putting regular pictures up.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we've got Lee and then Christine. And
Hi,
yeah.
yes. So I'm Lee, I'm from the Royal Horticultural Society. I work in our gardening advice team, so quite a long time worked with Christine and others to kind of promote better solutions, because like that picture we saw of the front garden where the new paving over situation was definitely not as good as it could be. We've tried to provide solutions around that for a long time. And we do work a lot in the science side as well. So working out which plants are best to cool and to attenuate rainfall and to reduce the problems. But the overriding message from our side is, of course, you need those plants to give those benefits. So knowing the right plants help, but if you don't have any plants at all, it's no good. And the thing that's really heartening from this actually is this wider network of people where everyone is actually doing something. That is quite a change over the years. So I kind of want to recognise that, because it sounds like we're at square one, but as Christine's highlighted with the timeline, we're really not. We've learned so much. And I think a lot of it now is about trying to work out which audiences we want to communicate, so who we want to listen, and which ones are the decision makers and who can actually make change, because all those people kind of need the messages in different ways and need picking off in different ways. Working with the Trees and Design Action Group, they've been quite effective at targeting their audiences and getting messages to them. So sometimes it's been like the councils, and they have created documents where it's about practical guidelines, but that'll be for the tree guys on the ground. But then they'll create principles and they'll try and sell those in more to the councillors level. So that there's lots of things potentially we can look at within the industry, I think, and pinch some of these ideas. But the overriding thing that I really like is that people here are doing things, and that's a big change. So thank you.
Hey, that's great, and great. Thank you so much for coming on to the call today, Lee. Christine, I think we're running up. We're getting close to 1:30 now, so so we'll take Christine last, and fittingly, of course, because Christine's been running the Front Garden project for a long time, for you to have the last word, and then I'll just wrap it up, and with some next steps. So, Christine.
Well, thanks. I didn't mean to sort of get up anyone else, but no, what I wanted to say really was, you know, coming back to the point about engaging with councils. Yes, I'm sure that there are positive ways of doing it, but you know, you've got to bear in mind that the legislation it really hamstrings them, and it, you know, there are over 74,000 front gardens in the London Borough of Ealing alone. There's not a cat in hell's chance that they can go round and actually check that replacement paving, which is what's usually a problem here, it conforms, because you know it's just impossible. But you know, individuals may have more success with their local councils. I was just going to quickly say another way of possibly getting in with councils and influencing them is depaving, because they can depave their public space. And as I said earlier, you know, paved front gardens are so normalised that you know, people just assume they're going to be paved. But if bits of paving are depaved in the public space, it does make a difference and it changes people's attitudes. If you walk down Grosvenor Place, which goes from Hyde Park Corner to Victoria, you can see quite clearly that there have been bits of the pavement along Buckingham Palace wall which have been planted and taken out. You know, paving's been taken out. And it just makes such a difference to that road. Loads of councils could do that on a small scale. And they do, a few do, some pavements, some roundabouts, some, you know, junctions, all of those could be depaved, and that would change people's attitudes to paving. It's maybe a way of some of you getting in with your council and starting to talk about green and depaving. Thanks. That was it, really.
Thanks so much, Christine. And I think essentially what that kind of makes me think back to is actually the imperative. I don't think that we're forever going to be in the space in this city where this is going to be a nice to do. Soon is going to be we're just going to have to do it. Thames Water have said that we need something like 357,000 rain gardens to capture and attenuate rainwater. And that's just about flooding. That doesn't talk about the river pollution issues that are caused by the extent of the runoff. And of course, then we haven't even started to talk about heat and biodiversity and the other problems caused by front garden paving and parking. So, so I think since it is now 1:30, I'm going to have to wrap up. But it's just a huge. I'm just so overwhelmed at how much interest there's been in today's meeting. And certainly, what we'll do is we'll set up probably a quarterly meeting, I would have thought, and then we'll also set up a newsletter, which would just involve us emailing everybody and saying, please, can you send us contributions that we can then put into something. And then beyond that, we'd really like to think about what campaigning maybe we could think about doing. So that might be around local authorities or national legislation. The other thing, finally, that I should say is that it would be amazing if anybody here is interested in helping to manage or run the network, or even chair it. And so if you, I'm chairing far too many things already. So it would be really, really amazing if people are interested, then they could send that to me. So hopefully you have my email address, but I'm just alice@cprelondon.org.uk. So yeah, that's it. And thank you, huge thank you to everybody, and thanks so much to our speakers and to you all again for attending. So thanks very much and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alice and everyone.